After 8 years of pouring every ounce of her heart into a wealthy family marriage, all she got was infidelity and a cold, ruthless divorce decree. Having sacrificed her youth, dowry, and lifelong artistic dreams for a man, was Shen Qingyue doomed to wallow in despair, trapped within the wreckage of a discarded marriage? Condemned as reckless by her birth mother, stripped of every shared asset by her icy ex-husband, forced to lock away her extraordinary gift for design, was she fated to become nothing more than a pitiful, penniless divorcee in the eyes of outsiders? When her former husband returned, consumed by regret and clutching their old wedding ring to beg for reconciliation, while a gentle investor offered her a love built on equal respect, what path would she choose to take? Shen Qingyu once tied her entire identity to Gu Tingshen. She turned down a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study design in Paris to care for his aging family, emptied all her marital savings to prop up his fledgling enterprise, buried her talent for jewelry crafting to play the role of a docile full-time wife, and navigated endless banquets and tedious household affairs to uphold his social standing. Yet all her devotion was repaid with unapologetic betrayal and a sudden, decisive separation. Refusing to claim the mansion or the substantial settlement he offered, she walked away with absolutely nothing. Her birth family refused to understand her agony, leaving her only her loyal best friend, Qing Wan, to shelter her in her hour of ruin. She moved into a cramped attic apartment on the top floor of an old building, swallowed her pride to work as a retail assistant at a jewelry boutique, and squeezed every spare minute to rebuild her expertise in gem appraisal and design. She crossed paths with Su Ran, a revered industry mentor, and began studying metalwork under her guidance, healing the fractures in her soul as she filed, forged, and carved precious metals into delicate ornaments. She claimed the silver medal at the National Young Jewelry Designer Competition with her signature collection, Bamboo Tenacity, and strut to overnight fame with her debut line, Asti's First Light. She founded her independent jewelry brand, Ye, struck collaborative deals with prestigious luxury labels, secured millions in venture capital, showcased her works at Milan Design Week, and took home the award for Outstanding Female Entrepreneur, evolving into a formidable, self-reliant, avant-garde designer. As her career flourished, she crossed paths with Gu Tingshen once more through a high-end real estate cross-brand collaboration project. Witnessing her radiant, accomplished new self, he drowned in unrelenting remorse and repeatedly sought private meetings to win her back. His mother also paid her a tearful personal visit, begging the pair to reconcile. Meanwhile, Zhou Muji, a perceptive and tender venture capitalist, admired both her unyielding resilience and quiet softness, laying his sincere affection bare before her. Woven throughout the narrative are the suffocating coldness of aristocratic marital strife, the searing heartbreak of giving everything only to be utterly devalued, the quiet grit of a woman clawing her way out of total collapse, and the unshakable clarity she gains after breaking free from her old life. The full arc traces her complete journey, from a woman who drew all her worth from another person, broken and heartbroken, to an artist who carves stability and self-worth with her own hands. Stella set the phone down and walked to the center of the living room where the grand piano stood. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. This Steinway had been a third anniversary gift. He'd said she played beautifully and bought it to give her pleasure. But over the years, most of her time had been consumed by managing his schedule, hosting family dinners, and attending to his parents. A layer of dust had settled over the piano lid, and she hadn't touched it in ages. At 1 a.m, Derek returned. He reeked of alcohol, his jacket draped over his arm, his tie hanging loose around his neck. When he saw Stella still sitting on the sofa, he frowned. "Why aren't you asleep? Aren't you supposed to take Mum to her checkup tomorrow? Derek, I need to ask you something. Her voice was eerily calm, the stillness before a storm. He yanked off his tie with irritation and tossed it onto the entryway console. Tomorrow, I'm tired. Who is the woman in the photo? He stopped, turned, and let his gaze travel from the phone to her face. A few seconds passed, and then he laughed, a laugh laced with contempt. I was wondering how long you'd keep pretending. Since you've seen it, I'll be direct. Stella, we're getting a divorce. No explanation, no comfort, not even a hint of guilt. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a glass of whiskey, his tone as casual as if he were discussing a business deal. I'll have my lawyer reach out. This house is my premarital asset, registered in my name. You signed a prenup, separate property throughout the marriage. I'll give you a settlement that should cover your expenses for about 2 years. She stared at him, unable to process that this man she'd shared a bed with for 8 years could speak to her with such icy precision. Derek, I haven't worked since I graduated. I gave my entire 20s to this family. That was your choice. He cut her off, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I never forced you to be a stay-at-home wife. You said you wanted to take care of the house so I could focus on building my career. Now I want to start a new chapter, and you should start yours. Her fingers tightened around the phone, her nails digging into her palm. You planned this, didn't you? Transferred assets, prepared the papers, just waiting for me to find out or to break down. He was silent for a few seconds, an admission. Then he walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Stella didn't sleep that night. She sat on the sofa from dusk until dawn, replaying every moment of the past 8 years. She remembered giving up the opportunity to study in Paris so she could care for his ailing mother. She remembered emptying her savings to help him through a cash flow crisis when his company was just starting out. She remembered the countless dinners where she'd circulated as Mrs. Gu, building relationships on his behalf, only to be told today that it had all been her choice. When the first light of morning crept through the windows, she walked into the walk-in closet and surveyed the racks of designer. Stay with me. It's a small guest room, messy, but the bed's clean. Stella nodded, the warmth of the cup seeping through her fingertips, the only comfort she'd felt all day. Vivian's apartment was in an older neighborhood on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms, modest but cozy, with Vivian's own design pieces hanging on the walls, delicate silver jewelry and gemstone-mounted paintings. Stella looked at them and remembered the late nights they'd spent together in the art studio during college, when she used to say she'd open a jewelry workshop someday. Then she'd met Derek, and his promise to take care of everything had made her abandon that dream. Stay as long as you need, Vivian said, squeezing her shoulder. I'll take tomorrow off and help you find a place. Over the next month, Stella visited every rental agency she could find. With the small remainder of her settlement, she rented a cramped apartment, barely 300 square feet, on the top floor of a building with no elevator. Stifling in summer, drafty in winter, but with a south-facing balcony that offered a sliver of the skyline. She began updating her resume, only to realize that aside from stay-at-home wife and Mrs. Derek Gu, she had no meaningful work experience to list. Every application she sent vanished into silence. The only response came from a jewelry store looking for a sales assistant. Base pay of just over $400 a month, with meager commissions. At the interview, she wore a simple white blouse, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, and went without makeup. The store manager, a woman in her 40s, gave her a once-over. Any sales experience? No, but I studied jewelry design, Stella said softly. The manager laughed. Design? That's all fluff. What we need here is someone who can work hard and sell. 1-month probation. If you can't handle it, you're out. Stella met her eyes. I'll handle it. Her first day, she stood behind the counter, taking in the stream of customers, memorizing every piece's material, craftsmanship, and price. During her lunch break, she sat on a stack of cardboard boxes in the storage room, eating dry bread while watching jewelry grading tutorials on her phone. After work, she returned to her top-floor apartment, practiced her smile and sales pitch in front of the mirror, and studied until late into the night. Vivian visited occasionally, bringing home-cooked meals and the latest design magazines. One evening, she noticed the dense notebooks piled on Stella's desk and said, "Stella, you could come back to design. I could mentor you." Stella shook her head. "I need to start from the bottom. I don't want shortcuts, and I don't want to rely on anyone." She lifted her gaze, and Vivian saw something flicker in her eyes. "I want to earn back, with my own hands, everything I gave up." 3 months later, Stella passed her probation and became a full-time sales associate. Her numbers weren't exceptional, but her professional eye set her apart. She could identify the origin and cut of any gemstone and suggest pieces that complemented a customer's complexion or hand shape. Soon, regulars started asking for her by name. One Saturday afternoon, a woman dressed in understated elegance came in looking for a necklace to match an evening gown. Stella recommended a moonstone pendant and patiently explained its iridescent play of color. The woman was impressed, and as she left, she gave Stella a longer look. "You studied design at some point, didn't you? You don't talk like a typical salesperson." Stella smiled. "I studied a little in college, but I gave it up." The woman handed her a business card. "I'm the founder of Key Chi, an independent designer brand. If you're interested, come by my studio sometime. We occasionally need part-time craft assistants." The card read Susan Sue. Stella tucked it away, her heart stirring with a mix of hope and apprehension. That night, she called Vivian, who exclaimed, "Susan Sue! She's a big name in the industry. Minimalist Eastern style, international awards. You have to go." That weekend, Stella arrived at Susan's studio, a converted warehouse filled with workbenches, polishing machines, wax molds, and half-finished pieces. Susan gave her a tour, then handed her a piece of silver and a file. "Make a simple band ring. Take all the time you need and show me when you're done." Stella took a deep breath and picked up the tools. She remembered her professor's words from college. The soul of a piece lies not in the size of the gem, but in the breadth of the line. She worked for 2 hours, shaping the silver into a thin, fluid curved band with a subtle depression on the inside, like a drop of water. Susan examined it for a long time. "You have talent, but your technique is rusty. The details need refinement. If you're willing, come 2 days a week and I'll teach you basic metalwork and wax carving. No pay, but I'll feed you." Stella agreed without hesitation. From then on, her life condensed into 3 points: working at the jewelry store, learning at Susan's studio, and teaching herself at night through online courses and sketching. She spent nearly every dollar of her savings on tools and materials. Her fingers were perpetually marked with tiny burns and cuts, but she never complained. One night, she finished a sketch, a necklace inspired by bamboo joints, woven in platinum and emerald, symbolizing resilience and rebirth. She studied the drawing and realized, with a jolt, that every line reflected the landscape of her own heart over these past months. She was no longer drawing other people's opulence and perfection. She was drawing her own emergence from the earth. She sent the sketch to Vivian, who replied within seconds, "I'm going to make this necklace. Stella, you've found it. You've found yourself." That night, standing on the small balcony under the vast sky, She felt no longer like a woman discarded by the roadside. She was a seed trampled into the mud, and she was sprouting. 6 months later, Stella quit the jewelry store and joined Susan's studio as a full-time assistant. The pay was modest, but enough to cover rent and basic expenses. She began learning the full custom process: client consultation, sketching, 3D modeling, wax casting, setting, polishing. She absorbed every step like a sponge. Susan was exacting. Design isn't just inspiration. You have to understand the limits of your materials, the ductility of the metal, the hardness of the stones, the strength of each clasp. A good piece finds the balance between aesthetics and engineering. Stella took every word to heart. Gradually, she completed small custom orders on her own, and client feedback grew consistently positive. One client, picking up her wedding ring, said, "The lines look like two hands coming together. As soon as I saw it, I knew it was the one." In that moment, Stella felt a satisfaction unlike anything she'd known before. Not the superficial thrill of receiving luxury goods as Mrs. Gu, but the real sense of value created by her own ability. Meanwhile, Vivian nudged her to participate in an online designer showcase. Stella uploaded a series called Dawn, 6 pieces inspired by the darkness before first light and the first ray of morning. She used black onyx, white diamonds, and pale gold metal to shape the image of light breaking through a fissure. Unexpectedly, the collection was shared by a fashion blogger and went viral overnight, amassing thousands of likes and hundreds of inquiries. Stella's inbox was flooded, questions about pricing, custom orders, even possible collaborations. Vivian called, buzzing with excitement. "Stella, you've made it! You should start mass-producing or taking orders." But Stella stayed grounded. She knew her workshop's capacity was limited. If she rushed, quality would suffer. After consulting with Susan, she decided to accept only 5 limited edition orders, each piece handmade by her, accompanied by a handwritten certificate. The pricing was reasonable, but not vague. The 5 pieces sold out in 3 days. After material costs and the studio's share, Stella earned her first independent income since the divorce. Not a fortune, but enough to move into a slightly larger apartment with a proper workbench and to buy a small laser welder. The post was widely shared, and many women commented that it resonated deeply. Orders grew from 2 or 3 a month to over a dozen, and Stella added new equipment and hired her first assistant, a young woman named Zoe. Of course, growth brought setbacks. She once custom-made a sapphire necklace for a major client, but because she'd misjudged the welding temperature, several connections along the chain had hairline fractures. The client noticed and demanded a refund and compensation. Stella didn't hesitate. She issued a full refund, wrote a heartfelt apology, and included a small gift. That night, alone in the studio, she examined the ruined piece, testing different welding parameters until she found the problem at 2 in the morning. She hung the failed necklace above her workbench as a reminder. Vivian called her foolish. "You lost so much money. That client may never come back." Stella shook her head. "Trust is worth more than any one order. If I don't take my own work seriously, why should anyone else trust me?" 3 months later, that same client returned and brought a friend. "I looked at other custom designers after," she said. "No one was as honest or as responsible as you. I want to give you another chance." Stella took the new order and spent double the time testing every step. When the piece was finished, the client was thrilled and sang her praises across her social circle. Stella's reputation took a leap forward. She also started attending industry salons. At first, she was the quietest person in the corner. But when she shared her portfolio, heads turned. A veteran collector told her, "Your work has emotion. It's not mere decoration, it's narrative." Those words gave Stella enormous confidence. She realized she didn't need to imitate the popular contemporary luxury styles. She could follow her own path. Modern craftsmanship infused with the structure of Eastern aesthetics, expressing the resilience and subtlety of women. Just as her business was gaining momentum, an unexpected development emerged. Vivian ran into Derek's branding director at a design fair, who casually mentioned that the property group was looking for a high-end jewelry brand for a cross-industry collaboration. When Vivian relayed the news, her expression was complicated. "Stella, you might have to see him again." Stella was polishing a silver ring. She paused, then continued. "If I see him, I see him. I'm the director of Stella Jewelry now, not his ex-wife." She lifted her head, her gaze steady. "He'll walk his path, and I'll walk mine. If a real business opportunity comes up, I won't avoid it. But I won't give ground just because it's him, either." 3 days before the National Young Jewelry Designers competition closed, Vivian slapped the registration form on Stella's workbench. "You have to enter," Vivian said, bracing her hands on the table. "Do you know the last winner now runs her own atelier in Paris? The runner-up got recruited by Cartier. This isn't just another contest, Stella. It's a gateway." Stella had been putting the final polish on a ring, the grinder humming. She shut the machine off, removed her goggles, and picked up the form. The requirements were straightforward. Submit a complete series of design drawings with a creative statement, and finalists would produce physical pieces. "I don't have a series good enough to show," Stella said. "Your bamboo resilience series?" Stella stared at the screen for a long moment, then placed her phone on the bench and picked up her file again. Susan watched her. "You're not going to react?" A small smile tugged at Stella's lips. "I'm afraid if I get too excited, I'll mess up the setting." That night, she stayed late in the studio by herself. With only the warm desk lamp on, she arranged the wax models of all 6 pieces in a line. The light cast long shadows across the workbench, like a row of standing bamboo. She remembered what her professor had said. Great design leaves a piece of the designer inside it, but the viewer never knows which part. Now she understood. The 6 years of quiet, the public slap, the countless sleepless nights, all of it was folded into those curved platinum lines. She didn't say it. The work said it for her. The finals were in Shanghai. Stella flew for the first time in her life. Economy, window seat. As she watched the clouds stream beneath the wing, she felt a surreal sense of distance from the woman she'd been just 2 years ago, eating dry bread in a tiny attic while studying online courses. Vivian came with her. In their Shanghai hotel room, they did a final inspection of each piece, double-checking every emerald angle. Vivian watched Stella's focused expression and said softly, "Whatever the result, Stella, you've already won." Stella looked up and smiled. "I know. Getting here, I'm already not the woman who just nodded and went along." On competition day, Stella wore a simple black ensemble she'd chosen herself, her hair swept up, a pair of bamboo stud earrings she'd made. The jury consisted of 5 senior industry figures. Stella presented her work in 6 minutes, explaining the creative concept and process. She didn't mention her divorce or her personal history. She stuck purely to design. But when she spoke about bamboo staying underground for years before breaking through, and how fast it grew afterward because its roots had gone deep, a woman designer on the panel gave a slight nod. Results came that afternoon. Silver. The gold winner had 8 years of independent experience and had exhibited in Milan. Stella didn't feel robbed. The silver prize was enough to make her visible to the industry. More surprising, after the ceremony, the woman designer approached her with a business card. "I'm the founder of Pure Essence. We're looking for emerging designers for a collaboration. Your work has an Eastern sensibility, but a very contemporary expression. I'm interested. If you're available, come by my studio next week." Stella took the card, her fingers trembling slightly, but her voice steady. "Thank you. I'll be there." Back in the hotel, Vivian spun her around 3 times. Stella laughed. "Relax, it's just silver." "Just silver?" Vivian widened her eyes theatrically. "Do you know what this means? Starting tomorrow, you're not an assistant. You're a silver medalist in the National Young Designers Competition. Your price just doubled." Stella laughed and shook her head, but beneath the surface, something new was stirring, a validation that went beyond vanity. She had once believed her only worth lay in being a good wife. Now she discovered she could define herself on a much larger scale. Later that night, gazing out at the Huangpu River lights, she remembered a conversation from the year before their divorce. She'd mentioned wanting to learn something new, and Derek hadn't even looked up. Why? Just take care of the house. She'd said nothing then. Now she wondered what he'd think, seeing her in a Shanghai high-rise after winning a national award. She shook off the thought. That path had nothing to do with her anymore. She texted Susan. "I got silver. I'm meeting Pure Essence's director next week." Susan replied instantly. "I always knew you could. Let's celebrate when you're back." Stella smiled and put her phone away. The night lay gently before her, and she felt like a bamboo shoot finally breaching the earth, roots that had spent years gathering strength, and above, the sun. After Shanghai, Stella's life accelerated. The Pure Essence collaboration was finalized. Stella would design a 12-piece collection themed around return, with the brand providing distribution and marketing, profits split evenly. It was her first official partnership as a designer. Susan and Vivian helped review the contract, line by line. When she signed her name, Stella noticed the difference from signing the divorce papers. That time, she'd felt like she was shedding skin. Now she was growing new flesh. At the same time, she made 2 key decisions. First, she officially registered her own brand, just Stella. Simple, direct, a distillation of everything she'd climbed over. Second, she leased a small studio with a showroom. Not large, but south-facing, flooded with light. On moving day, she stood in the empty center of the new space and looked around at the bare walls. She remembered the day she'd stood in the villa's grand living room, surrounded by expensive furniture she'd never chosen. This room had nothing, but every inch would be filled by her own hands. Susan gave her a new laser welder as a housewarming gift. Vivian brought a potted plant. Her assistant Zoe brought over the workbenches. That evening, the 3 of them sat among unpacked boxes, eating hot pot. Vivian, mouth half full of tripe, mumbled, "Stella, now that you're officially a founder, what's your first goal?" Stella thought, "By the end of the year, stabilize monthly revenue at over $3,000. Next year, we get a larger space and hire 2 full-time artisans." Vivian gave a thumbs up. "You've changed." "How?" "Before, you said I'll try. Now you say, we'll do." Stella paused, then laughed. Vivian was right. Her language had shifted because her identity had shifted. She was no longer a woman making ends meet. She was the director of Stella Jewelry, with partners, direction, ambition. The brand's first collection, Dawn, launched 2 months later. Stella posted short process videos showing a ring's journey from silver sheet through cutting, forging, soldering, grinding, and polishing. No narration, just the crisp sounds of metal and soft background music. Clean, textural. 18 limited pieces. No ads, just previews in design circles and a few blogs. On launch night, all 18 sold out in 2.5 hours. Stella stared at the order dashboard, her pulse racing. She sent screenshots to Vivian and Susan. Vivian called immediately, voice shaking. "Stella, this means your brand has a market. You're a commercially viable independent designer." Stella gripped the phone and took a long breath. A year ago, she'd stood behind a counter all day for $400 a month, her hands raw from tools. Now her revenue from one night exceeded that by dozens of times. But she didn't let the excitement linger. She immediately organized the orders, set up shipping, hand-wrote every certificate, and personally inspected each item. Traffic was luck. Retention was skill. All orders delivered on time. Feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Some clients posted photos on social media. One wrote a long letter. The dawn ring had accompanied her through the worst of breast cancer treatment. She'd worn it into surgery because she felt like it carried light in her hand. Stella read that letter at her workbench and cried, not in grief, but deep, unburdening gratitude. For the first time, she understood that her work wasn't just selling jewelry, it was leaving a small light in other people's lives. That was a meaning no amount of money could buy. She printed the letter and pinned it to her studio wall. When autumn came, Stella got a call from an editor at a well-known fashion magazine. They'd seen her social media and wanted to do a profile. "Your designs have strong narrative power, and your personal journey from stay-at-home wife to independent designer would genuinely interest readers. Would you be open to an interview?" Stella paused. She'd never spoken publicly about her past. Her social media focused on process and craft, never marriage or family. Yet she understood. VP Lin, a business associate of Derek's, SDA, "Ms. Shen, I saw the magazine piece. Congratulations, you're doing brilliantly. Mr. Gu saw it too and asked for your contact. Our group has a high-end property project and we're considering local designers for a collaboration. Would you be interested?" Stella stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Her heart beat a little faster than usual, but not by much. She typed 8 words. "Please send the official collaboration request." Then she put her phone down and returned to polishing a silver ring. The steady hum of the grinder filled the room. Hours later, VP Lin sent a PDF with project details. Stella didn't respond immediately. She forwarded it to Vivian and Susan, poured herself a cup of tea, and stood by the window watching dusk settle over the city. She felt no fear and no anticipation, just a calm curiosity. What had Derek's face looked like when he saw her photograph? Not that it mattered, but if a genuine business opportunity existed, she wouldn't let old history shut the door. She'd spent 2 years rebuilding herself to stand her ground on any path. She finished her tea and turned back to the PDF. VP Lin's brief was professional. A custom VIP gift project for a high-end residential development in the city's new central district. Properties averaging over $1,500 per square foot. The developer wanted to present each new homeowner with a jewelry piece designed by an independent local artisan with quality and design on par with top luxury positioning. The budget was substantial and the requirements stringent. 12 different pieces, brooches or cufflinks, each integrating architectural design elements from the building, using a refined Eastern aesthetic. All had to be completed within 3 months. Stella read the brief 3 times, then itemized the demands. She didn't rush to sketch. First, She visited the project's sales center and construction site, requesting a designer's tour to study the building's lines, facade materials, and landscaping. The exterior featured extensive, copper-toned metal and dark stone, creating a rhythm of strength and grace. A bamboo grove had been planted in the garden, rustling in the wind. Standing at the edge of that bamboo grove, Stella had her direction. She could merge the building's geometric lines with the soft curves of bamboo leaves, using the contrast between metal and gemstones to create something that felt simultaneously structural and alive. She worked for 5 consecutive nights, developing 3 versions before settling on a concept called Eve and Shadow. She planned a combination of platinum, yellow gold, and pale blue-grey sapphires to capture the interplay of roof curves and bamboo silhouettes. Each piece would be no more than 2 inches across, but packed with detail. She shared the concept with Vivian and Susan. Vivian wrote, "The rhythm of this series is fantastic. I especially love the cufflinks. You've compressed architectural lines into a 1-inch space. Brilliant." Susan responded simply, "The craftsmanship will be challenging, but you can do it. Adan it." Stella spent 3 days preparing renderings, fabrication notes, and sample models, then submitted her proposal. She didn't know that before the proposal reached VP Lin, it had passed across Derek Gu's desk. Derek was in a meeting when his assistant placed a stack of documents beside him, including the Stella jewelry submission. When he turned to that page, his finger stopped. The photo showed Stella in a deep blue blouse, her hair swept back, smiling at the camera. The smile was different from what he remembered. He recalled her. He suddenly understood. Stella Shen was no longer the woman who waited for him to come home in the dark. 2 weeks later, the results were announced. Stella Jewelry won the exclusive partnership over 5 other contenders. When Stella received the formal contract, she stood in her studio, took a deep breath, and signed her name with deliberate care. She knew this meant she'd be working with Derek's team for months, and possibly with him directly. She was ready. The first project coordination meeting was scheduled in the property group's headquarters. Stella arrived 10 minutes early with Vivian and Zoe, dressed in a clean black suit, wearing one of her own designs, a minimal bird-shaped pendant on a fine chain. Her hair was neat, her makeup simple. She projected professional composure, with no trace of personal history. When the conference room door opened, Derek sat at the head of the long table. He looked thinner than when she'd last seen him 2 years ago, with deeper lines between his brows, but his custom suit was as impeccable as ever. Around him sat the marketing director, brand consultant, and VP Lin. When Stella entered, Derek's gaze landed on her face and held for about 2 seconds. He'd expected some flicker of emotion, avoidance, tension, anger, or at least discomfort. But Stella's expression was composed, almost businesslike, with a slight professional smile. She walked to the opposite side of the table, pulled out a chair, and opened her folder with fluid ease, as if he were just another stakeholder. "Mr. Gu, Mr. Lin, everyone, I'm Stella Shen, director of Stella Jewelry, and this is my design partner, Vivian Chin." She reached across the table, shaking hands one by one. When she reached Derek, her grip was dry, steady, untrembling. "Ms. Shen, we're pleased to work with you formally," Derek said. "I'm looking forward to the collaboration as well." She nodded, withdrew her hand, and opened her folder. "We've completed the first detailed design concept based on the project requirements. Today, I'll walk you through the design direction, material choices, and production timeline, and I'd welcome your feedback." For the next 40 minutes, Stella stood before the projection screen and presented with clarity and control. She showed models and renderings, explained each of the 12 pieces and their fabrication details. Derek watched from his seat, sometimes the screen, sometimes her. He noticed the small scar on her finger, likely from a welding burn. Her hands used to be smooth, untouched by manual labor. Now they carried marks of effort. He remembered saying, during the divorce, that she had no work skills, and now she stood in his conference room, using exactly that skill to design the most important gift for his most important project. After the presentation, he asked, "With each piece handmade, will the 3-month timeline be tight?" Stella answered, "We currently have 3 experienced craftspeople on our team, and I personally oversee all core processes. We've budgeted the schedule carefully. It's feasible. We'll also do a mid-production sample approval to ensure quality consistency." Derek nodded and didn't press further. After the meeting, VP Lin arranged a brief tea break. Stella stood by the window, looking at the street below, while Vivian whispered, "You were so steady, I almost forgot you two were married." Stella swelled. The elevator reached the lobby, and she sent the message. Then she walked out into the autumn sunlight, the breeze lifting her hair. She put her phone in her bag and didn't look back. Derek sat in the tea lounge for 20 minutes, his Longjing tea growing cold. He looked at the screen, a reply so calm it verged on indifference. He found himself thinking of how things used to be. When he came home, she'd ask, "What would you like for dinner?" Or, "Do you want me to rub your shoulders?" When he traveled, she'd pack his suitcase, add his medication, tuck a handwritten note inside. All those small, gentle attentions he'd taken for granted now felt like dull punctures. He hadn't regretted the divorce at first. The first year, he was occupied with a new romance and expanding his business. He barely thought of her. But after that fling soured, he overheard at a gathering that Stella had won a design award. Something stirred, a faint unease. Then more news came. She was doing custom work, building a brand, featured in magazines. Each piece of news was like a fine needle, shallow but present. He'd thought about reaching out, but always put the phone down. He assumed she'd come back. She'd left with nothing, no income, starting from scratch at over 30. How far could she go? He waited a year. Nothing. Another 6 months. Still nothing. She was a ship that had silently sailed away, and he'd thought she'd stay in the shallows, but she'd passed the horizon. Now she stood in his conference room, in a suit she'd designed, wearing earrings she'd made, discussing contracts, timelines, profit splits. When her gaze passed over him, it was no different from how she looked at anyone else. That night, Derek returned to the villa. He'd stayed here after the divorce, not changing a thing, and sat in the living room. He noticed something missing. He looked around and realized it was the piano. The Steinway from their 3rd anniversary, the one she used to play. He couldn't remember when it had been taken away. He called his butler, who hesitated. "Mr. Gu, the piano was moved out the day after the divorce. Ms. Shen arranged it. At the time, you said she could take anything from the house." He hung up and sat in the silence, a phantom melody of Chopin floating in the edges of his memory. That night, Stella returned to her studio, catalogued the feedback, redrew sketches, and adjusted welding parameters with her team. It was after 11 when she locked up and rode her second-hand scooter home, the night wind filling her jacket. She parked, walked upstairs, showered, and checked her phone before lying down. No new messages from Derek. She put the phone aside and slept soundly. Midway through the project, a key commercial term required in-person confirmation. Derek attended the meeting himself. Stella and Vivian arrived with updated proposals and cost breakdowns. Derek sat at the head of the table in a charcoal cashmere sweater, more casual than before. Stella didn't lower her guard. The first half went smoothly. Technical details and quality standards were settled. Then came payment terms and profit sharing. Derek proposed delaying 30% of payment until 4 months after final completion. "Standard group policy, Ms. Shen," he said in an official tone. Stella flipped through the draft contract and looked up. "Mr. Gu, I need to purchase a batch of natural sapphires before production starts. If 30% of the payment is delayed 4 months, I'd have to front nearly $80,000 in materials. For a business my size, that's not workable." Derek leaned back, half smiling. "I imagine your studio has some cash flow. You've been getting good buzz lately." Stella didn't bite. She smiled politely. "Good buzz doesn't cover material costs, Mr. Gu. You of all people know that. If your side has real payment constraints, I suggest we restructure, material deposit up front, balance upon completion." It was a Thursday afternoon. Stella was putting the final polish on a brooch when Zoe came over. "Stella, there's an older woman asking for you. She says she's Mr. Gu's mother." Stella paused, then set down her tools and walked to the door. Mrs. Gu stood in the hallway outside the studio, wearing a dark green cashmere coat. Her hair had grayed, and there were more lines on her face than 2 years ago. When she saw Stella, her eyes reddened. "Stella," her voice trembled, "may I come in for a moment?" Stella stepped aside. "Of course." Mrs. Gu looked around the studio. It was small but neat, design sketches on the walls, half-finished work on the benches, a plant on the windowsill. Her gaze settled on Stella. In her work apron, sleeves rolled up, protective gloves on. She seemed a world away from the woman who had arranged flowers and brewed tea in the villa. "I came without telling Derek," Mrs. Gu said, sitting down, hands clasped on her knees. "I saw your profile in the magazine. I had no idea you were doing so well. I know I treated you poorly when Derek wanted the divorce. I didn't speak up for you. I even told him, 'Don't drag it out.' I've regretted that." Stella poured her a glass of water and sat quietly, listening. Mrs. Gu continued, her voice thick. "After you left, I started to realize how much you'd held together. When Derek's father was in the hospital, you did everything. You managed my checkups. You handled all the little things. After you were gone, we understood how exhausting those little things could be." Her voice broke. "Derek hasn't been doing well either. He and that woman were done quickly. His business has struggled. His temper is worse. But deep down, he regrets it. He just won't say it." Stella listened until Mrs. Gu finished, then spoke gently. "I understand how you feel, but Derek and I are divorced. We have separate lives." "Can't you?" Mrs. Gu's eyes held desperate hope. Stella shook her head. "I can't. Mrs. Gu, it took me a long time to remove the Mrs. Gu label from myself. If I went back, every sleepless night, every burn on my hands, every tear, it would all have been for nothing. Not because I still hate him, because I don't need him anymore." Mrs. Gu lowered her head, tears falling on her hands. "I was blind. I never stood by you." Stella handed her a tissue. "Don't blame yourself. I chose to be a stay-at-home wife. That was partly my responsibility. But what's past is past. If you ever feel unwell or need anything, you can still reach me. But Derek and I, it's not going to happen." Mrs. Gu dabbed her eyes, stood, and took Stella's hand. "You're a good woman. My family didn't deserve you." Stella walked her to the door, watched her descend the stairwell, and stood in the hallway for a moment. The wind swept through the corridor, and she felt it on her face before she turned back to her workbench. Zoe glanced up uncertainly. Stella caught her look and smiled. "What? You think I should have softened?" Zoe shook her head firmly. "No, I thought you were incredible." Stella laughed. All right, back to work. 6 more rings to go. Michael Joe entered Stella's orbit late. He was moved by her honesty and lightly touched her shoulder. Then let's let it happen naturally. He turned toward his car, then looked back. Stella, no matter what, you're the most clear-headed woman I've ever met. She laughed softly, climbed the stairs, and went inside. She knew she'd made the right decision. Her past had taught her that leaning on someone before she'd found her own footing would eventually lead to a fall. She needed to stand solidly before she decided to stand beside anyone. Until then, one direction, forward. Word of Stella Jewelry series funding broke on an early spring morning. Vision Capital led the round, with 2 co-investors contributing a total of $800,000. In a single year, Stella's valuation had multiplied nearly tenfold. At the signing ceremony, Stella wore a dark green silk dress with her bamboo brooch pinned at the collar. She spoke from the podium. This time last year, my studio had 3 people. Today we have 12. Last year, I was haggling over the price of a single sapphire. Today we have reliable supply chains and full quality control systems. But my greatest pride isn't the numbers. It's that behind every piece we make, there's a woman's story. The applause was warm. Vivian, in the second row, had tears in her eyes. Susan sat beside her, clapping and smiling. Derek wasn't there, but word reached his office. That evening, Stella received an email from Derek's personal account. Just one line. Asterisk, congratulations. You did it. Asterisk. She read it, closed the window, and returned to writing thank you notes to her clients. 3 months later, Stella Jewelry was invited to exhibit at Milan Design Week Satellite Fair. Stella flew to Europe for the first time with her new collection, Mountain and Sound. The booth drew steady traffic, and her work caught the eye of a European boutique buyer, who placed the brand's first international order. Upon returning home, she was notified of the Women's Entrepreneurship Pioneer of the Year award. The ceremony was hosted by a prominent women's foundation, with a jury of business, cultural, and academic leaders. On stage, under the lights, Stella wore a black and white gown, her hair loose, with a pair of crescent moon earrings she'd designed. She gripped the trophy and looked out at the faces below, some familiar, some not, but all watching her. Her speech was brief. I used to think losing everything was the end. Now I know it was only the beginning. I'm grateful to everyone who knocked me down, and to everyone who helped me up. Most of all, I thank the person who didn't give up on herself. Thunderous applause. Backstage after the award ceremony, Stella was taking photos with Vivian when a voice came from behind her. Stella. She turned. Derek Gu stood in the hallway in a dark suit, holding a small black velvet box. He looked more worn than she remembered. There had been rumors that his group was facing liquidity problems, several projects delayed. Vivian discreetly stepped away. The hallway was theirs. Derek. What are you doing here? Stella's tone was calm, not defensive, not cold. I saw you won. I came. He stepped forward, holding out the box. Open it. She took it, opened the lid. Inside was their wedding ring, the platinum band she'd left behind when she moved out, the inside engraved with their wedding date. She looked at it for a moment, closed the lid, and handed it back. Derek, keep this. It belongs to the past. His breath caught. Stella, I know I owe you so much. I want to make it up to you. Start over. Let me give, this time. You need better space, I have properties, resources, I can help you. Derek. She stopped him. Her voice was still gentle, but her eyes held an immovable calm. You're not in love with who I am now. You're in regret for losing someone who gave you everything. But you don't know me now. You don't know I'm up revising designs at 3 a.m, or that I worked 20 days straight to meet a deadline, or how many burns I've gotten learning to weld. You see the Stella on the stage. The woman outside the spotlight, who handles a file and a torch every day. You don't know her. Derek was silent. She continued. You once said we had nothing in common. That I wasn't good enough for your world. You were right. Back then, you were my only world. But now I have my own world. It's full of people and projects and dreams that matter to me. I'm not going to shrink myself again for anyone who pushed me away. She looked into his eyes. I wish you well. But I'm not part of your life anymore. Please respect that. Derek clutched the box, his knuckles white. He looked at her and felt she was farther away than ever, farther than the day he'd been cold to her, because then she'd still been waiting. Now she was miles ahead. Stella. His voice cracked. I'll regret this forever. Then carry that regret and live your life. She smiled faintly. Take care of yourself. She turned and walked toward the exit. The light from the hallway flowed over her, her silhouette long, her step steady. She didn't look back. In the corridor, Vivian was waiting, joined by Susan, Michael, Zoe, and the studio crew. When they saw Stella, everyone broke into grins. Time for hot pot. Vivian looped her arm through Stella's. We're celebrating, right? They swept her toward the parking lot, the spring breeze brushing her face. She glanced back at the building behind her, lit, buzzing, then turned and stepped into the laughter of her friends. Her life, from that point on, continued straight forward.